Well, good afternoon. My name is Paulo Veras. I'm the Managing Director of Endeavor in Brazil. We're going to have a 90-minute Q&A session, and so I think we should dive right in.
Are they going to be yelling out questions too?
No, I have the questions.
Well, we ought to have everybody get in the game here. we ought to have a conversation.
We're going to do that because we get, all the best ones, so...
Just wide open, right?
Okay. So to begin with strategy, planning, and focus areas. GE is a very diversified organization, and most people tend to believe that focus is important for a business to succeed. So the question is, what does focus mean to you? And what is the balance between diversifying to take advantage of opportunities and keeping the focus?
Well, I don't think it's one or the other. I think without question, an individual business in a diversified company has to focus on what they're going to do and how they're going to win in their market, how they're going to lead, the niches they're going to participate in, the acquisitions they're going to make to stay on top. But that doesn't mean that a diversified company can't be taking the intellect from all the strength of a diversified company is transferring knowledge, people, and resources across businesses. The idea that it's better to be in a single business is the dumbest idea ever propagated, and it's propagated by analysts. Security analysts love to say focus, because that's all they do is focus on one industry. But the facts are, the intellect you can get, the training you can get, the experiences you get, if you use it. If you run a multi-business company with a phone call to a 3-person headquarters that phones in the numbers every quarter, and that's the job of consolidating the numbers, you don't get it. But your idea is to focus individually and glean the best idea transfer, the best people across businesses, and allocate resources. When one business is in trouble, take it from the other one that's doing well and work your way through cycles. And so from my standpoint, there's nothing any better than having a diversified company.
And to achieve that, do you think the balance between growing organically versus growing through acquisitions varies across industries? Do you see any differences between, say, consumer products, services, or commodities?
Well, look, let's take a look at Google. They grew organically, and now they can't buy it. Now that if they walk by a business, they buy it. Just passing by, whether it's YouTube or anything else. So I think businesses, acquisitions fit along with organic growth in every business. I think that people tend to like organic growth because it has some purity to it. In my view, acquisitions are every bit as good. They can jumpstart things. If you can merge them right, you're off to the races. So I think there's no such thing as a formula for this type of business should only grow organically and this type should only make acquisitions. I think it's a healthy blend of the two across businesses. Now, when I answer these questions seriously now, if some of you have different views of this, I want you to yell them out. Let's have a discussion. Look, I got a point of view, but it's not the only point of view. The conversation's richer if you guys don't just stare at me, but come back at me with some of your own thoughts. So don't hesitate, even if he yells at you.
And getting a little bit on the broader issues of leadership, how have your priorities changed as a leader over the past decades? How do you see these priorities changing for the leaders in the future in terms of what you're worried about, what you prioritize?
Well, I think without question, old command and control structures in a knowledge-based society are out the window. Knowledge used to be power. Now everybody has the knowledge. So you've got to be able to understand how to motivate, excite, energize great teams of people to take the hill. And people are only going to take it if they understand what the mission is, why the mission is good for the company, and why it's good for them individually. And then you've got to put a set of values around it. But I think today people have too many options to work too many places that if you don't create an exciting atmosphere with a clear-cut mission that they see the benefits to themselves and the company, because you're pointing out to them, you won't have a chance. So I think without question, it's exciting people around the vision.
Great. And going a little bit back to the M&A subject, you wrote a lot about that in the book. And why do so many mergers fail to deliver the benefits that there are originally estimated for them? And what are the critical factors, success factors for the mergers and for successful acquisitions?
Well, I don't think that many go bad. I think that McKinsey report, which I just had a meeting the other day with the McKinsey guy. I was chairing a session, and the McKinsey guy was on the panel, and he was talking about mergers and acquisitions and how what a great way they were to grow. And I said, wait a minute, I've been fighting analysts for 15 years based on your stupid report that says 70% of them fail. And that fundamentally isn't true. And I think the conditions that you want in an acquisition, you want to be sure there is a cultural fit as well as a numbers fit. You want to be sure that you don't pay too much. You don't get caught in deal heat, where you got to have it, and the investment bankers are pumping you. And 5 or 10%, okay, but 20 and 30% over. I don't know if any of you follow the Guidant acquisition when Boston Scientific and Johnson & Johnson were in this big fight for the last several months, and everyone declared Boston Scientific the winner because they got it. Winner. They ended up paying 40% more than they started with. The acquisition has taken their stock from 35 to 16. Is that a winner? Johnson & Johnson, though, had a discipline where they said, this is what it's worth, and they announced at the moment that they went beyond it, anybody can have it. We're not going any further. You need discipline in an acquisition, because the deal gets everybody heated up, and away they go. You can't have what I call a reverse hostage. Now, you guys may have run into this a couple of times, but the reverse hostage is when you want a deal, before you know it, you're negotiating with the other CEO. And the conversation goes something like this. Look, I'd like to join your company, but I don't want your finance system. I don't want you coming to my planning meetings. I don't want you doing this. We've got our culture. We want to stay the same. Before you know it, the guy you were buying owns you. And that happens too often in this game, reverse hostage situations. I think you want to move fast. Ideally, by the time the deal gets through the regulatory agencies, everyone's in place. You've got your team in place, ready to run. You're not figuring it out after you get that approval. By the time the 90 days is over for regulatory approvals, everyone knows who's going to sit in what chair. People don't realize, people who buy a lot of companies don't realize that being acquired is like a death in the family. All the old is the closest thing there is to it. All your old relationships disappear. Who your boss was, what's going to happen to my pay, when will my reviews come, what about you had a career plan all set. It's gone. It starts all over again. So it's an enormously traumatic thing. You've got to settle it down fast. And you've got to decide that there's no such thing as a merger of equals. It's the dumbest idea ever invented. Somebody buys you, you're bought. And they got to get their practices in as fast as possible. The classic example of this was when Daimler bought Chrysler. And they spent 2 years with A318 Airbuses flying between Stuttgart and Detroit, working on culture issues. Rome was burning, and they're talking about culture issues because they made it clear that they didn't buy them. Once Daimler admitted, Schrempf would come out and said, we bought them. That game got cleared up pretty fast. And the Chrysler and the Daimler guys came into Detroit and fixed it.
And talking about the cultural fit, which is very important as well as the strategic fit, since the value systems of two companies never coincide 100%, which would you say are the fundamental values that must be the same for it to work? Otherwise, you would pass on an acquisition.
Things like a meritocracy, things like a pay system that is consistent, a meritocracy that rewards the best about in the same way, that the general philosophy of pay is close to the same. Like, for example, we didn't buy a lot of companies in Silicon Valley in the late 90s because we couldn't explain to engineers in our healthcare business that were designing CAT scanners and MRIs, we couldn't explain why they were doing this great work, and yet we were giving BMWs to the kids that were joining us in California, and that we had to give them a 100% pay increase because housing costs in California were higher than they were in Milwaukee. We didn't want to go through the pollution of that issue. Now, why don't you guys take the mic and tell the experience of Imbrew and what were the cultural issues there? You got a mic?
I think we need to sell the BMWs there.
Talk about the cultural issues there.
The big cultural issue was about being focused in results, and BMW is not part of results. BMW is part of expenses, and part of our culture is be fanatic about expenses, not in favor, against.
So how long did it take to get that adjustment?
I think in less than a year. I think it was too long, but by some of the conditions of the merge, we had to spend more time because all the people couldn't be changed at the same time. But now we have all the right people in the right seats.
Did you pick the best from each team to take the jobs?
I didn't understand.
Did you pick the Imbrew players and the Imbrew players? Did the best players get picked for the key jobs?
Yeah.
From both sides?
Yeah. And now we have in all the most important seats, the best people from both sides, independent of how many from one side or from the other, is just by the merit of being the good one to perform the job. Meritocracy is on top of from where the guy comes.
Well, that is a very important point. When you make an acquisition, what you've just done, if it's close to the same size, you've just done what headhunters would take 5 years to do. They've given you all this talent. And too often the conqueror syndrome takes over, where the takeover person goes in and installs all their people and throws out some of the very best people. So for an integration to be successful, you need a weekly rhythm at least, and if it's a big acquisition, the top has to run it, and you have to select in an open basis the best from each team. And that is hard sometimes for people to do, because they got their old friends they've been working with for years. Now we took them over, let's put our guys in. It's the dumbest thing you can do. Best acquisition that I made in my career was when we bought RCA, which was a large, it had networks, it made televisions and aerospace, all that. And we ran the integrations every week. And at the end of 4 months, everyone was in their seat. And RCA had 4 of the top 7 jobs, and we had 3. And it turned out to be a fabulous success, and it was not all GE people going in there and taking it over. Think of it as you just had an employment agency, a headhunter, deliver you all this talent. Now you got a fresh pot, 2 pots to look at, their pot and your own pot, and pick the best.
And if you have to recruit people, which you usually do from universities and stuff, so what do you believe is the best strategy to recruit young, talented people? And have you ever seen any approaches which are different and would be worth mentioning in the divisions in different countries to get the best young talent for the company?
We always felt, I'm sure there are thousands of techniques, But we always felt that sending people back to the university with 5 years experience, no more, who had had great success in your company and could sell the company based on their own experiences, was a lot better than having recruiting managers. Those jackasses aren't worth anything. They've been hanging around forever, and they go out to a school and look like it's some old turkeys out there telling about how it used to be. Recruiting, if you go to a campus today and look at the recruiters, in many cases, they're people just younger than I am, who are close to retirement in the recruiting package. You don't want that. You want people that can sell your story, who have experienced it, and are contemporaries of you.
And that would be even for undergrad? Or is there a difference?
No, for undergrads.
Okay.
For anybody, as far as I'm concerned. You want people that can really talk about their experiences and make them come to life for the students. Do you guys have different views of that?
I think it's a pretty similar one from all the people here at the auditorium. And what's your point of view on recruiting outsiders versus growing and promoting people from within? Why should you favor one or the other?
Well, there's no such thing as a formula, but ours usually turned out to be 80% or so internal. Because, look, you want to show your people that they're being valued, and you want to move them up. And on the other hand, there are times when you don't have a specialty that you need, and you go out and you buy somebody who's really good to come in and deliver you a new direction in an area you might be in. I'll give you an example. We tried for years. We had number one in CAT scanning, now number one in MRIs, and we could not get out of our own way in ultrasound. We could not find our way out of the room. We're running a $50, $60 million business. Well, we hired this Bangladesh PhD who had been involved in an ultrasound company from the first day he left college. We paid him a lot of money, brought him in, and he's built a $1.8 billion ultrasound company that we had all our best, most talented people, couldn't get it off the ground. So there are moments in life when you need expertise. You got to go find it and put it in. But generally speaking, we favor. Yes, please.
Why couldn't you make a go of your reinsurance company?
Well, I think, in hindsight, we'd look a lot smarter if we waited a year to sell it. I mean, we sold it just prior to a no hurricane season. But in general, we had a very nice run with it. We had it from 84 to 2000 without any problems. Then we got hit with a rash of hurricanes, as the whole industry did. Losses in the industry were like $80 billion. The current management decided they didn't want to deal with the cyclicality that comes from one-time incidents. And so we sold it. I just think that it was one of those things that when it was going great, it felt awfully good. But when you start getting hit with a rash of hurricanes we've had in the Northeast and along the coast of America, it's been a killer. And we proved to be lousy underwriters for that point.
Still on the people management part of it, how do you keep the best talent in the company after you bring them in?
By constantly letting them know they're the best talent. We're back to candid appraisal systems. We're back to talking about differentiation, which is fundamental to this method of management, where the best are hugged, loved, paid a lot. The middle are told why they're in the middle and where they can go going forward and what they have to do to get there. And the bottom are asked to move on to another location in another company. But that's only cruel. People like to say, that's cruel. How can you possibly let somebody go? This is an awful thing. That's only cruel if you don't tell them where they stand. For example, what happens when a company gets into a recession 20 years down the road? The boss walks down the hall and says, look, we got to cut costs 20% here. And I'm sorry, Mary, you have to leave. And Mary looks up and says, Why me? And the boss says, well, you were very good, Mary. He said, well, I've been here 31 years. Couldn't you have told me before this? I asked a group of 4,000 people yesterday at this seminar for HSM, how many of you know where you stand in your organization? We had 4,000 people there. We did not get 100 hands. And we kept going back. You mean none of you know where you stand? Come on. Raise your hand if you do it all. No. 3,900 people are sitting in an executive conference not knowing where they stand in their company. Talk about a bad...
We have this question here today. Let's repeat the question.
Let's repeat the question. How many of you know where you stand? I don't believe it. What a setup that was. No, but yes, please.
You all heard about many people go and say giving these bad performance people another chance to perform in other companies. What about losing the talents of the company? When you're losing the guys that you don't want to lose, what kind of reaction do you have?
Well, the thing that differentiation does for you, it spotlights who your top 20 are, and you can pick 25 or 30, whatever you want to use for a number, but that directionally, those people. It lays out the middle 70, and it highlights the bottom 10. If a manager, and you have a complete picture of all the top 20s, we had the view at our core, at the headquarters, that we own the people, the top 600, and we were renting them to the businesses so that we could move them. They were our assets, not the individual business assets. Now, if all of a sudden my assets are being lost by a lousy manager, call a little manager in for a chat. So you get another whack at the managers who have to reward and keep these people excited and turned on about the work. If they're losing your best people, it's a disaster. That's why differentiation, it highlights your best. It lays it out for you, and it lays it out at the headquarters level who you can't afford to lose. And I think the interesting thing is most of the conversations around differentiation are ass backwards. Everyone wants to talk about, usually not, that was a good question, but normally it's, what about the bottom 10? Isn't that awful? That isn't what you want to talk about. You want to talk about the top 20, how the middle 70 is going to get there. And you don't want to shoot the bottom 10. You want to give them time to move on. But they shouldn't be surprised by it. Because you want to be, in my case, 4 times a year. Everybody who worked for me got, here's what I like about what you're doing, and here are issues you've got to deal with. Every time they got a raise, they never got a raise without an appraisal. They never got a bonus without appraisal. They never got a stock option without an appraisal. So you can use every encounter where you're having these meetings to hand out rewards for performance and give people, it doesn't have to be a big form, it's a handwritten sheet of paper. Because you have a job as a manager, every one of you in this room, to let everybody who works for you know where they stand. That's one of your jobs. You can't be called a manager if people are coming to work in the dark. Now, obviously, since we've got that wild hand raising here, no one here does that. But.
And especially in times where there's a crisis, the company is in trouble or something, it's really hard to grab hold of the best talent. How do you do then? Especially if there are salary or benefits cuts, if the goal wasn't achieved, how do you keep the talent in a tough situation?
Salary or benefits cuts?
For instance, if they don't have the bonus or even the company is forced to renegotiate the salaries, if there's a real hard time.
I can't imagine a time that hard. No, seriously, I can't imagine that you don't take actions to get your cost structure right by getting rid of your weakest. The idea of the jerk manager who comes in, 10% across the board cut, they ought to be arrested. That's not managing. That's not managing. It's the cowardly way out. You guys say, we got big problems. We're going to have to make some cutbacks here. But you're in great shape, and we're going to take care of you, And sorry, you have to go, but we're telling you, no, you're not that good anyway. But you don't want to ever cut it flat. That's a killer in terms of morale. Why would you want everybody in the same boat? And the idea, I think it's just weak management. I think the other weak management trick is the people that come back from talking to the boss, saying, staff meeting, the boss, Joe, he wants me to cut 10% of the cost. I got to do it. Never take any measure from somebody else to take your actions. I would die before I would say somebody told me to go do something. You're responsible for it. You're doing the right thing. You're not passing down information from up above. That is the weak way to run a business. You're responsible for it. If you're managing people, you're responsible for handling it. Then you won't have this crazy morale crisis because your best will still be charged up. They'll be charging up their people, and they'll be going forward. You won't have this. If everybody gets into the doomsday scenario and everybody gets a pay cut, somebody takes away their food stamps, whatever it is, that's a disaster. That's dumb management. That's not leading. Anybody want to? Come on, we're going to get you guys in the game here. Yes?
How did you manage turnover in the company? So I guess you also had an idea on what is healthy turnover and how did you deal with it? Does it differ from level to level? Did you force turnover, different turnover on a higher level than on a lower level?
No, we had a bottom 10 that every business had to deal with. And that was by salary band. And so within a business, the higher levels, mid levels, and the bottom, they had a 10% look. Now, sometimes they didn't have anybody they wanted to go of. We had a lot of discussion about it. But they were always looking at a graded curve. And I don't think it's in. I'd say this, at the top, where we had the CEOs, only one person ever left GE at the top of their own volition in the 21 years I ran it. Everyone else was told, look, you're fabulous, you're terrific, but you've gone as far as you can go with us. Why don't you in the next year or two let the headhunters call, we'll play along, and you go out and run a company. That's why we have 56 CEOs in the Fortune 500 that came from being working for us. Because you don't want people at the end of their rope. You want flow-through and ideas and energy coming to the new job with new eyes. Did I answer your question or not?
Yes, you did. Thanks.
And how did you achieve this 56 people getting out of GE and becoming leaders elsewhere? How does this sort of leader factory work? Because I think a lot of companies here face problems that they feel they're really dependent on a single individual, and then if they lose them, they're going to have real trouble. So how do you manage to develop that many people and still maintain the business?
You believe in training? You believe in cross-business moves? You believe in cross-functional moves? You always put backups in? You have an appraisal system and a monitoring system that's as rigorous as Sarbanes-Oxley is for finance in human resources. So you've always got a backup. And I believe more than anything, to speak of your one-person staff, whenever a star leaves, within 4 to 6 hours, you want their replacement in the job. You don't want anyone in the company to think something went bad. So you instantly fill in behind them with somebody that was already on your slate, so that no one's walking around going, Jesus, I think it's bad. Why'd Joe leave? Why'd Cynthia leave? No, it's over. By the next day they come to work, somebody's sitting there and they're the new boss. So you always want to do that. That's what a great human resource system does for you. Look, in our succession program, let me just tell you how we did the succession. We started out with 22 people. We got down eventually to 3 over 7 years. We had the 3 people there. 6 months before the end, I brought them all into my office, I told him, I want you to know, in 6 to 9 months, all 3 of you are going to be fired from your current job. But what I want to do now is put a COO, Chief Operating Officer, in underneath you. So you will, and how well you train this person will have an impact also on who's picked. But in 6 to 9 months, one of you is going to get this job, and 2 of you are going to have to go run another company. Well, they all interview, they're all lined up. Now, the people in the company, they don't really care who becomes CEO. They care who's going to be their boss of any business. So we had defined who their bosses were. We wanted stability when the thing happened. So the day we appointed Immelt to replace me, the other two guys, within 10 days, one went to Home Depot and one went to 3M to run them. And their successors were already in place running the businesses with fresh eyes and new thinking. That's what we want, fresh eyes and new thinking all the time. Yep.
Did you have any hope that one of the other two might stay?
Oh, God, I didn't want him to. Because what happens with, the question was, did I have hopes that anyone would stay? I fired them 6 months before. And they all went out and talked to the other companies. If I picked McNerney, and the board did, to pick McNerney to run it, Immelt would have gone to 3M. They were all set. Both of them had talked to 3M. Both of them were going to get the job, and 3M's directors had talked to me. And whoever got the job, they were going to take the other one. That was the game. But, because, let me tell you what happens in most situations. Even if they're the best of people, these people were really friends, and still are. Factions form. And they are perceived as losers. And that team's over there with losers. And these are winning people. They don't want to hang around that place. They want to go run their own thing and feel good about it.
And how did you support Immelt after the transition? How is the period afterwards? Did you just disconnect, or did you talk to him regularly? How did you plan that support phase?
Well, he worked with me for 8 months while I stayed there. I tried to do Honeywell, which didn't work. And then I left. I've never been back to the office, ever. I talk to him on the phone once a month. Generally, he calls me when he's doing a deal he thinks I might hate, just to get my blessing. So I won't be a pain in the ass out in the field talking about what a dumb deal he made. So he'll generally call me for that blessing, but not really, he's not calling me to say, should I do it? That's why he's got the job. I'm not tired. He's got fresh eyes, and fresh eyes are going to go at it. And so I don't spend any, I talk to him once a month. I talk to him socially, but he's got his own show, and I got my life. I don't give a damn about that life. That's another life.
And talking about HR, is there any way to measure HR effectiveness? Are there any key performance indicators, any indicators that you can use to get a feel if it's doing their work right or not?
Well, I think clearly how many leaders are formed from their business is clearly a metric. Whether people feel, I think one of the great ways to manage is polling. Now, politicians poll all the time, and you might feel a company polling might not be the right way to do it. We learn more by running 25,000 person surveys every 6 months, where we ask them questions. We didn't ask them, do you like the food in the cafeteria? Do you like your parking space? We didn't ask them those questions. We asked them, are you feeling what we're saying? We go down maybe 12 questions. Are you getting candid appraisals in your business? Are you feeling the quality per program? Is it changing the game, or is it just a bunch of charts? We'd ask them very specific questions, and then we'd get that feedback. So you'd have a pretty good feedback on the appraisal system, as seen by them. You clearly have what kind of training programs they're running. If you've got HR people doing picnics and newsletters, you're dead. You know, it's the craziest thing in the world. And I asked this question in Mexico. There are 5,000 people in the crowd, 5,000 HR executives in the crowd. I asked them, how many of you are perceived by your company as having a position at the table equal to the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer? Maybe 25 to 50 people out of 5,000. Because HR is a backwater in most places. It's the health and happiness crowd, the benefits, the picnics, the newsletter, the birthdays, that nonsense stuff. And it's not about leadership. Now, that doesn't have to be that way. Think if you were running a soccer team, the Brazilian national team. Would you want to be talking to the head of player personnel or the team accountant? Player personnel, right? We're hanging around the green-eyed shade team accountant. Why the hell do CEOs want to do that all the time? They're usually boring. They're not that much fun. They're not dealing with people. They're giving you a sheet of numbers. They're grunts. And yet everyone wants to hang on to their CFO like it's tied in the hip. It's crazy. When they should be talking to the player personnel person, who has to be, in my words, a pastor and a parent. They have to be a pastor in keeping secrets and not running to me when they talk to them about their careers. They have to really keep confidences. And they also have to tell it like it is, like a parent does to a kid. So a good HR person is a pastor and a parent. And they're not some palace intrigue. They're not the benefits leader. They're not all those things. And usually the best HR people come from operations. They've been the best salesperson. They've been a plant manager. They've dealt with all kinds of real life situations. And they get it, and they have an embedded reputation in the company that's very high. Embedded reputations, remember this if you remember nothing else today. The embedded reputation of who you put in key jobs will do more for you than any speech you'll ever give. For example, if you're going to have a big initiative on quality, or you want to globalize your business, and you're giving big, blowy speeches about quality programs, or big, blowy speeches about globalization, and then you put Mort or Sylvia, 2 years from retirement, or somebody that nobody thinks much of, leading the project, forget it. You've got to put somebody with an enormous reputation so the whole organization says, holy Christ, they mean it. This is for real. This is something that's important. That'll do more than any of your speeches, any of your talks, because everybody in the organization knows who's who. Embedded reputation is absolutely critical. To give you the extreme of embedded reputation, one of the tragic things that happens in a company is when an assistant, executive assistant or secretary, you use the word, whatever you want to use, goes to night school. 7 years, saves up, company has supports her. Then she gets her degree, and she thinks something's going to happen. She's still the secretary. She has to change jobs. So then I'd give these women speeches. You've got an embedded reputation. No one's going to see you in this company different than before because you got a degree at night. They still see you as who you were. You've got to take that new degree, that new you, package it up, and take it somewhere else. You're selling a new package with a fresh slate. It's true about important projects the same way. Embedded reputation is a killer, or a great aid, but it has to be considered in every key appointment.
Going back to the leadership issues, how do you believe the leaders should focus their time? Should they spend time developing people, processes, making deals, reviewing results? And maybe the best way to talk about is to tell us how was your typical day as a CEO? How would you do it?
There's no such thing as a typical day. I mean, you guys all know that. Those of you who are CEOs here, there's no such thing as a typical day. But I saw every budget review or every planning, long-range planning cycle review as a personnel review. I mean, when somebody comes in and talks to you, we would meet. We have an annual cycle of doing appraisals. So we got an appraisal on the people. We've got the backups. Then we'd have a planning meeting we did that in the March-April timeframe. Then in the June timeframe, we'd have a 3-year outlook, if you will. Before that meeting, we'd have a half an hour personnel meeting updating the personnel review we had in March, April, to see what actions have been taken to fill in that. After the meeting, we would have a 30-minute meeting to review, well, what'd you think of Mary, Joe, Steve? So it was always a personnel review, but it was formalized. It wasn't just an ad hoc in the hallway. After the planning review, we'd do that. Then the budget review would come up 6 months later. Again, before the meeting, what's happened in personnel for the last 6 months? Then we go to the operations review. Then afterwards, how do you think each one did? So people are always the game. Because I am totally convinced in business, the team that feels the best players wins. Now, some people get lucky. They fall into a company as badge number 4 in a startup, and before you know it, the train takes them right downhill, and they're doing great. But they may not be the best, as you have to go back uphill in the future. So personnel reviews are critical all the time. They're part of the rhythm of the company. And there is no meeting ever that isn't a personnel review. Yes? And we'll go to you afterwards. Okay. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry. I have a question on leadership. At Ambev, we have a simple and very effective definition of a leader. And a leader is someone who sets and beats challenging targets together with his team, and in a simple, focused Ambev way. So it's pretty simple, 3 focus areas. Would you agree with that, or do you think that something is missing there, something crucial?
No, I think that's certainly one element. We would have an axis on performance against numerical numbers, and an axis on performance versus values, low, medium, and high. If your values are hate bureaucracy, speed, gender blind, etc., you'd get evaluated there. And then you'd get evaluated on your numbers on the other axis, high, medium, low. And we would then promote people according to that. Some have great on the values, great on the numbers, onward and upward. Some don't make the numbers and don't have the values, out the door. Some have the values and have trouble with the numbers. You give them a second chance in another division, move them to another place. Because if you can get people to buy into your program, your beliefs, you want to keep them around for a couple of chances. The thing that kills most companies, though, is the horse's ass who makes the numbers and doesn't have the values. And people keep those people around. We've all been guilty of it. Let's go for another quarter with them. You know, I know they're going to give us the numbers, and you're going to get the numbers. You got to get rid of them, and when you get rid of them, because the whole organization knows that you don't have any values when you do that, you can't get rid of them and say they left for personal reasons to spend more time with the family. You got to say, look, these were good people, but they had to go because they didn't do the 3 things we want to share ideas across businesses. They didn't promote their own people to new jobs. They didn't develop leaders. They didn't do whatever it is. It becomes a teaching moment. Another one. Yeah.
When you have 2 equal companies, equal companies, different cultures, but successfully, both successfully, and decided to merge or to create a new company. How can you make it work? When one company buys another one, it's okay. You buy, you say what you have to do. But when 2 successful companies, but with different cultures,
and they merge,
how is it possible to that thing works well?
I believe, first of all, the biggest misnomer in the world is merger of equals. You just said one has a future and one doesn't. That's not equal. They may have the same sales and the same numbers, but that's not equal. The one that's got the trajectory has to dominate the integration plan for where they're going. Because obviously they had a better multiple than the other guy has. If the other guy isn't growing, and he's just a good, solid, steady Eddie, he's not going to have a high multiple. So he's not going to be the lead in the acquisition. Mergers of equals are a disaster. Spend too much time deciding whose finance system, who's this system, who's that system. Get on with it. Pick one. Go. Is that, yes? Do you disagree?
No.
Okay.
I agree. That's why I asked, because I think it's really for you.
How can you achieve this very strong culture with the same values in such a global company and diversified as GE, for instance, where you have different cultures, different countries, different businesses? How is it possible?
Not different values. Differentiation isn't clear. Now you have to do it at different paces in different companies and at different dollars. Costs more in Germany to implement differentiation than it does in the U.S. You got to be a little more sensitive in Thailand than you are in Yugoslavia. I mean, that's just the way it is. But it's the same general framework. And you have to repeat your message until you want to gag on it. You can't get sick of your message. The vision and the values to get to that vision have to be articulated over and over and over again. You've got to reward role model behavior about that. When you have your company meetings, you've got to bring the role models up on the stage and highlight them. You've got to constantly be supporting those things that you've just asked about. You can never stop role modeling the behaviors you want and the results you want.
And in decision-making, what do you think is the balance between centralized decision-making, meaning at headquarters, versus local decision-making for strategic issues in global companies? What is the ideal role for headquarters, and what should be left for the local operations to decide?
Well, headquarters should be as small as humanly possible. They don't make anything or sell anything. All they are is overhead. So they should be as small as humanly possible. They should basically allocate resources, dollars, and human capital, and they should be the facilitator of best practices. They ought to be, every time they smell one across a big business, they ought to be exaggerating it and selling it to the other businesses. They ought to be out all the time transferring knowledge, transferring ideas. As far as day-to-day operations is concerned, should stay in the business. If they're going to make a big acquisition, because you're allocating resources now, the central has to get involved. But on a day-to-day basis, if the headquarters is bothering the business units, they don't understand each other's jobs. It's one of the problems the automotive guys have. They never step out of the old job. They start out designing headlamps. Then they get a promotion to fenders. And they might make dashboards. So they're all telling the last guy that they just left the job how to do the fender. I've seen meetings with two CEOs arguing in the parking lot over the tails, whether or not they should go to fins or rounded backs in the 80s on the Ford Taurus versus the fins of the old guy. Because the Japanese cars were coming then with rounded backs. See, that's not a CEO's job. But they've all done it, all the way up their careers. The nice thing we have going for us in a multi-business companies, we don't know a hell of a lot about the businesses. So our job is to get people, allocate resources based on the persuasions that we get, and the passion for those things, approve acquisitions, and transfer best practices. Is that?
Yeah, that answers the question. And in decision-making, how much consensus do you think you should seek before making a decision? What is the time to say, well, now I'm going to decide and let's move on, or to try and build some consensus among the rest of the people? How important is it to build consensus?
Well, obviously you don't want to do anything that the whole team hates. But in general, the reason you're called the leader and the reason you're paid to have that job is to make those calls. Now, talk it over, listen, see what other people think of it. But in the end, you make the call. You always want in deal flow. We used to have two guys that we call black clouds. And we always brought them into the deals because they hated every deal they ever saw. And they would just dump all over it. Dumb, stupid, why do that? And they'd raise hell with it. And they were very valuable to us. And they would beat the hell out of the acquisitions. So I think that's something that headquarters can do. Headquarters can't price a product, pick a color, do something like that. So day-to-day operations, 100% headquarters. I mean, field operations.
Right. And what do you think is more important, fast decision-making or fast implementation? Where do you draw the line? Let's stop discussing and implement. Or
well, let's assume the decisions are right. You better implement like hell. Look, the decision is easier than the implementation. It's easy to make a call, right or wrong. But implementing it takes a real focus and drive and commitment and passion to getting it done. But there's no answer to that. I mean, other than you want to be as fast as you can possibly be. You don't want to be somebody who's always saying, "Hey, come back for another 30 days. We'll look at it again." You want to be somebody that acts decisively. You'll make some mistakes, but if you don't go to bat, you don't get out of the dugout, you'll never get a hit. So it's a very important part of decision making. Having the guts to make the calls on little information and go for it. But implementing requires much more discipline. Yes?
What were the main techniques that you use in your company to maintain culture? We heard a lot about the meetings, your development and training center. What do you think would you give me some examples of the techniques you used to maintain culture inside the company?
To maintain
culture,
organizational culture.
Well, let's take a meeting with 500 executives, late 80s. We had removed 5 CEOs, ranging in business from $4 billion to $12 billion in the prior year. We had 5 new CEOs. Now, we could have gone to that annual January meeting where we have our top 500 there and talked about a lot of things. I opened up the meeting and talked about why these 5 left, why they had to leave. Because they didn't buy into boundless behavior, sharing ideas across businesses. They were filled with NIH in one case. One of them wouldn't even get a passport, and if one of your values is globalized, that's a little tough. So we went through, a pin could have dropped. But from that day forward, there was never any question about values, because these guys all had good performance. And in that one year, we saw more issues that we never had to go back and say, how do you maintain culture? Because the values were established, everybody walked around with a values card, and you praise people for getting ideas, going to Walmart and finding out how to follow customers, how to get the feel for what customers want. We went to Toyota to learn all about inventory management. We would praise the people that went there and took it back and made heroes out of them because they were going with the values we wanted. We believe, to our toes, that best practice sharing is an enormous competitive advantage. It's only a competitive advantage if you have an organization that believes in open sharing of ideas, that can receive the knowledge. Because there are a lot of organizations filled with NIH. So we would praise the hell out of finding a better idea every day. But we would say this. Let's take these 7 people right here. If we could get in one person the best idea that all 7 of these had and put in one, think how much smarter we would be. Think of all of us in this room could grab the best of knowledge from everybody and cram it into our own brains, how much smarter we would all be. That's the way you gotta set a tone. Our way of phrasing it was, slogan that it might sound like, was find a better way every day. Somebody out there is doing something better than we are. Your job is to find it, bring it back, and implement it. That was a challenge. But that's the cultural thing. See, if you end up in a multi-business company not sharing intellect, not sharing talent, you ought to be broken up. You're just a holding company. Let it all grow by themselves and run. So sharing intellect was critical. And therefore, to do that, we changed the compensation system. The compensation system was once individual business bonus. And the pie was sort of fixed. So if we each had a business and the pie was relatively fixed, I didn't want to help him. I wanted to make my business look better, so I get more bonus. And it was important. Business by business. So what do? We changed the compensation system to put lots of equity in the CEOs of the businesses and well down in the organization. 40,000 people had equity. Now if the stock goes up $10 and you got 1 million shares, that's $10 million. If you're making $1 million and you have a great year, you get 25% bonus increase. That's $250,000. 10 million versus 250. Are you going to go for your own business, or are you going to help the whole company achieve? So we aligned the compensation to match the values that we wanted: sharing, intellect, etc. People are always marveled at how we could transfer people between businesses, how we could share ideas very rapidly with each other. They were always shocked by it. I said it wasn't because they loved us. It was because we matched the compensation to that behavior. You know, the most famous one of all is the mistake companies make all the time. Fourth quarter's coming, revenue's a little short. Let's run a sales contest. Double credit for the fourth quarter on sales. Sales will go out, they'll blow the roof off in sales. Then you'll look down in January, where's the profit? Well, you didn't ask for that. You laugh, but that happens even today. The misalignment of rewards with behaviors. You should be looking at your reward system annually to say, is this matching? Am I rewarding what I want? Or is it some old system that's been around here for 10 years when our whole value system has gone this way? You got a question?
Yeah. In my quest for finding out how other people are doing things and how they're doing it, I visited Google recently.
Right.
And normally I can go into an organization and I get a pretty good feeling of what's going on and how they're doing. And at Google, I didn't get that sensation. I know the numbers are terrific, but I found out of the 12,000 people that were there, 3,000 had been hired in the last quarter. None of the people knew exactly what the other people were doing. Nobody seemed very clear on what his remuneration system was going to be, and very, very confusing. No set of values, and guys playing volleyball during lunchtime, others getting a massage, which they have every 50 meters and you deliver your laundry along the corridor if you want it washed. And so I came away as, am I an old timer? Is this where things are heading, or what's going on here? And since you mentioned Google in the beginning, what is going on there?
Well, the same thing went on at Microsoft, at eBay, and these companies have had trouble transitioning from that phase to the next phase. And what happens is they all look that pretty in the beginning. Massages, anything you want goes into place. And very few companies make that transition very well. They've got to put in Google now a planning system, a budgeting system, a human resource system, all around the mission and values of the company. That's hard when you're going 90 miles an hour and everything's working. But in the end, these guys are going to run into a stone wall like everybody else seems to when they can't take it to the next phase. And now they're going to have to do things like this. They're going to have badge number 4, badge number 14. That's how they call people, because the first guys there, they all made a lot of dough. Well, badge number 4 and badge 414 might not be any good. And everyone's going to think, well, they were here at the beginning with us. Can't hang on to those people. They've made a ton of money. Get them out. So all those things are the maturation thing that they have to do. It's not because you're an old codger or I'm an old codger. It's just the way companies have to get a new rhythm from those sky's the limit startup days. Yes?
I was discussing with a friend these days, and he said to me that the company that he works for is losing money with innovation. And we got to the conclusion that the concept of innovation they had is to create new flavors for the old ice cream in order to raise the prices of the product. How can you tell people that they must lose their veils of their mind in order to understand their time if they want to create innovation? So
can I make a compliment to that? Because there's other people asked about this. How can you keep the innovation spirit alive, but still have a strong process culture like you had with Six Sigma and all that? How do you manage to keep these two things going together?
A drive to lead the industries you're in, knowing you can't stand still, and rewarding new ideas. Now, innovation to me is not just a new molecule or a new idea. Innovation is a new process change that works. Innovation is all around you with new thinking. Innovation is going to another company and grabbing an idea and bringing it back, and then celebrating it all the time. But always bringing in the new. Like I say, people always ask me, what about a mentor? What do you think about mentoring? I think a mentoring is the worst idea ever invented. Why would you want to be stuck with one person? That person might be a turkey. They might not be liked by anybody. And they'll show you the benefits plans. You want to see everyone as a role model. You want to pick, as you look around, you want to pick that person because he's a better speaker. Listen how he does it. You want to look at that person because he can motivate people more in the techniques he uses. You want to read the magazines. Magazines are great mentors because if there's an idea there you think of, you can pick up the phone and ask somebody. And guess what? They can hardly wait to tell you. They're so flattered that you cared. They'll tell you everything about it. Learning is all around you. And that's what innovation is. It's a constant search for the next idea, not a new molecule, and you reward it and role model it constantly.
And what do you believe are the main challenges in building a global company? Which are the main pitfalls? And especially for the Endeavor companies which are here, they're a lot smaller than global companies. If you're starting to reach out of Brazil, so what sort of advice would you give to them?
Well, for sure, if you're going to another land, put your best, most trusted person there who has a great embedded reputation in your company. Don't take some new person because you think, well, the sales in Brazil are 25 million or 50 million, but I'm just starting up in Argentina. Let's put some person 2 years from retirement or a new hire. It's so much harder to run a startup in a foreign country than it is to take, back in a business, it's easier to run $1 billion business that's been around for 25 years than it is to go start up a new one in India. And yet we often use the old system. Well, he's running $1 billion business. He can't go over there and start that. It's a hell of a lot harder. So I'd put my absolute best people in any initiative. And then I would charge them within 3 years of getting a great local management, not expatriates, not people that come from the Brazilian company, but people that the Brazilian company got great training in building the leadership there, and then get local managers. I mean, the thing that used to drive me nuts was getting rid of expatriates. They not only cost a lot, they don't know as much. They don't have a feel for the country. And so your first job is to show the organization we mean business. We're putting Harry there, and Harry's our best player. Holy cow. And Harry then will be a Pied Piper. He'll steal 2 or 3 people and take them with him. So you're off and running. Then Harry, if he's good, will get locals to come in as backups very quickly and send the other 2 back home within 18 months to a year, to 2 years. But that's what you want to do.
Hi.
Yep.
Hi. We have been talking about right decisions and leadership. Can you please share with us some of your mistakes about leadership and how to be a CEO?
Well, I probably made as many mistakes as anyone that's ever been in business, because I've been around a while. I've had high-level jobs for a long time. One mistake, big one, was I bought an investment bank. We had about as much knowledge of running an investment bank. We had a set of values we're talking about and cultures. The investment bank's culture is one thing: my bonus, my bonus, my bonus. That's the way it works. These are greedy, hungry mercenaries. And that's how they work. And if you want to be one of those, be one. But that's what you are. But it's a totally different game. So our system didn't work in that basis, and we screwed it up totally. Now, we got out alive because in the end we were bought by other people, and we survived, but I never want to go through it again. I've made a lot of hiring mistakes. One of the things about hiring people, from the outside in particular, hiring people is the hardest thing you ever do. I probably batted 45% right in the beginning. After 40 years, I think I got to 75 to 80%. And I still, even if there were internal candidates, made mistakes in going to the next level. You just don't know how people are going to act at that next level. Now, what you can't do is hang on to your mistake, because you're embarrassed by making it. You've got to get it out, deal with it straight up, and own it. And that's hard sometimes. It's very hard, particularly when you're going up the ladder. You don't want to look like you're making mistakes. Well, acknowledge it, deal with it, and get the right person in the job. So hiring is a very hard game. We have a little view about that we've seen in action. My wife and I both get called a lot for references. And you can almost hear it go like this: Susie, what do you think of Johnny for this job? And Susie might say, well, Johnny's okay, but... And you can hear the person calling from the reference pulling the phone further and further from their ear. They don't want to hear you think they stink, the person they're going to hire. Because they've got an opening, they want to fill the job, they want to get it done, and they think they've got the right... All they wanted from you was a checked endorsement, that they can use your name to say, he said it was all right, or she said it was all right. I'm telling you, it's a hard job, and you've got to not fall in love with the candidate. You've got to do a more rigorous review of a hire than you do an acquisition. You can use your gut in an acquisition. Your gut will get you in real trouble with people. So I made a lot of those. And then in deals, every deal I ever looked at, and we did 200 a year, 225 a year, every deal I ever looked at had a 25% DCRR. Who would bring it to you if it didn't have that, right? They wouldn't bring you the package. You would never see it. So that comes in. They're all perfect. I think we probably batted 75%, but at least 25% blew up in our face.
You mentioned about best...
Yeah, we have a question here.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Hi. Coming back to for your sense of rewarding system, how much of the rewarding system is objective? How much is subjective? How do you deal with these two things?
You know, I would say financially, if you're talking about top-level people, I would say it has nothing to do with budgeting. It's how did they do against the prior year, and how did they do against the competition. That's one set of numbers. Budgeting is just an internal negotiation. It's stupid. It should be banned in all companies. It's ridiculous. You should have stretch goals, targets, and then measure yourself against the competition or the opportunity. I would say without question, I always felt that qualitative measurements were close to half of it. How much potential they have, how much runway, how many people have they promoted, all those sorts of things. But, there's no right formula. There's no right formula. It's whatever makes you more comfortable.
Thank you.
In a sales force, I think it's pretty straightforward. Ideally, in a sales force, I wouldn't pay them anything. I put them on 100% commission. That's the perfect compensation system. You deliver, you eat. You miss, you starve. And it also weeds out the weak. It's the perfect differentiation plan. Because they'll leave if they stink. They can't eat. So the more you can swing a salesman or a salesperson to compensation, variable compensation, the better off you are. Nothing's worse than a sales force with a high base pay. All they'll do is make the milk run, go to their friends twice a week, look like milkmen.
Talking a little bit more about the role modeling and leadership, in what extent did you need to reinvent, to transform yourself, to be ahead of General Electric for so long? Neutron Jack had the same values, same beliefs, same skills than the Jack Welch that leads GE through the black belt and workout phases.
Yeah. Well, I think, you got your same principles and your same authenticity. I mean, look, I think the one thing you got going for you here is who you are. Every one of you got your authenticity, and you got to keep it at all costs. We were in a situation in 1981 where we had 425,000 people and $26 billion of revenue. We ended up in 2001 with $130 billion in revenue, five-fold increase, and 300,000 people, 70% of what we had to start with. So 5 times in revenue, and so Neutron Jack had to get rid of that overhead. We were basically taking on, in the early 80s, we were taking on Japanese competitors that were killing us. And we saw the writing on the wall. Now, we were hiring all through the 90s, while places like IBM, who guaranteed lifetime employment in the 80s, took out 125,000 people. So I think what I did was I tried to play to the times we were in. And we were getting killed. We were selling television sets in Syracuse, New York. We were making them in Syracuse. Panasonic was selling them in the mall in Syracuse for less than we were making them there. That didn't take a lot of brain power to say we can't make them here anymore. So you end it. Neutron Jack is not a pleasant thing. But all we did for the last 15 years was add people. In the end, you got to have the value proposition, whether it be a service or whether it be a product, that wins. I totally enjoy journalists bringing their hands over GM's problems or Ford's problems. Invariably, you can ask them, what kind of a car do you drive? Honda, Toyota, Volkswagen. Never GE, GM, or Ford. Why? Because they're not providing the value. Now, journalists have trouble making the connection between the fact they're driving an import and the company isn't competitive. That's what you got to do. You don't. You absolutely, and you screw it up sometimes. And some people have favoritism played. Oh, give me a better way. I mean, seriously, I would by no means profess this to be the purest God on the hand of on the shoulder of the person making it. No way. But it's better than not having one. People say, well, what happens if they pick favorites? Well, if they pick favorites, you got a better chance of seeing it when they have to show you who their best are and who the middle ones are and who the bottom ones are than they would if they just kept it quiet and took care of their favorites.
In your opinion, is there a stage a company should reach before investing in a globalized and offshore approach? Is there some share of the local market? And what are the risks of this globalized approach losing focus on the local market?
I don't think there's any said rule, but I think you got to have your feet on the ground before you go global. I think you got to be having a business model that you're comfortable with, and that you can clearly assess what you'll look like in Argentina or the U.S. with your product offering. And if you're in the embryonic stage, it's pretty tough to do. And you might not have the rhythm of the company working. Your rhythm, you really have to get in a rhythm. That thing we talked about, budgets, planning, human resources, all those things. You got to have these as you fan out, because you're going to be hiring people that don't know what your values are. They weren't there when you started it. They did, as we heard down here. You think those 3,000 people that joined Google in the last 6 months have any of the same understanding of what Google wanted to be and where they were going as the founders did? No way. So you got to get those rhythms in place so you don't have the chaos he saw there. And I think going global is very tough. It's a very hard job. And do you have enough resources to do it? Big question. Can you afford to take your best man or your best woman and put them in New York or wherever, or Buenos Aires, whatever? Can you do it? Are your resources sufficient? So that's the way I'd answer the question. Yep. Yep.
Than everyone else. But do you think that in companies where you have a great flow of people, that salaries should be the ideal tool for differentiation? Don't you think that promotions and matching options, stock options, and variable compensations are better tools for differentiation than salaries?
I think they all play in it. I think they count. I used to do this when we gave out our stock options. I would have a meeting of the organization, and they would videotape it. I'd go to the training center, which looked like this, and I'd say to everybody there, I got great news today. We gave out our stock options. 26,000 people may have gotten it this time around. It's terrific news. It's terrific news for those who got it, and it's terrific news for those who didn't. You hear a pin drop. I mean, what's he talking about? This guy nuts? The people who got it, the stock's been going up 20% a year. You get on this train, you should make a lot of dough. If it keeps going like it has. For those who didn't, it's equally good, because we gave them to our best people. And if you didn't get one, you ought to go see your boss tomorrow and find out why you weren't picked. What you have to do to be one of the best people. Where are you falling short? Go have a meeting and try and get that dialogue going, because managers were probably head faking it, not doing the appraisal system the way they should. So I think you use every mechanism you've got. For example, on the bottom 10, our computers would not let payroll deliver an increase in pay to these people. 0 increase. Because otherwise, people would be slipping them a 3, 4, 5% increase, and their inflation might be 2%. They're doing the same, doing all right. Beat inflation. I like where I live here. It's comfortable. I don't want to move. So until you give every no stock options, no raises, so they're all tied together. So I don't think one's better than the other. The reason I quit was I didn't want to be treated the same as everybody else. I thought I was better. I thought I was doing more work. I thought I had a lot better results. I was actually happy with my raise. I was making $10,000. I got a $1,000 raise. It wasn't bad. I came back to my cubicle that I shared with 3 other guys. Mace, they all thought it was pretty good too. We all said, well, I got 1,000. What'd you get, 1,000? What'd you get, 1,000? I thought it was BS.
But don't you think that to keep people in the middle motivated, and it's important, if you want to get rid of the worst, you need to have your full, you can't afford to lose people from the middle to the market.
Absolutely. And in our book, which I hope you will read,
of course,
we spend a lot of time talking about the valuable middle.
Yeah, and I think that salary, it's a basic need for people in the middle. And sometimes to coping with inflation, it's a way to get people knowing that, well, I won't lose my my power of consumption staying in the company, even if I'm not one of the stars. But if I'm good enough to keep my job.
And you got to show them a route to getting to the top 20. You want them trying to get there, but you want to pay them. Look, my view was the top 20 would get 15 to 20%. The best of the middle 70 would get 8 to 10. The bottom of it would get 3 or 4, and the bottom 10 would get 0. Something like that. No, I'm all for that. You can't let the middle 70. They're the most valuable. They do most of the work.
2 questions. Number one, you mentioned that of the 200 deals you've done every year, 25% don't perform. Is it because the opportunity was misevaluated, or was it an implementation issue? Second question. Yep. You talked about the hit rate in selecting people along your life. It went from 45 to 75. Can you elaborate a little more on how that happened, why, and how much do you rely on others to help improve that hit rate?
Well, I mean, on hiring, that's where you desperately need a great HR person, and you need a good, open, candid staff team that looks at them too. You never hire yourself. I mean, that's the most dangerous thing of all. You fall in love with the person, you get excited about it, you want to go, and that's it. So I think without question that is, you want as much input as possible. And you just fight for more and more input. And if you got a candid place, they'll give it to you. On deals, they fall apart for all kinds of reasons. You miss the market. Their product wasn't as good as you thought it was. You had to take your people out of a good business to go save it because it wasn't very good. I mean, there's every reason across the market tanked. You saw it pretty good, and the market tanked. I mean, all the typical reasons there. But on hiring, you just got to fight like hell to get as much input as you can on the person coming in. That's where I think consensus is really valuable. So you asked me about consensus before. Right. That's where you really, I find that extremely valuable. Less so in deals. You want the proponent of the deal with fire coming out of their eyes, saliva coming down the side of their mouth, wanting it so bad they'll do anything to get it. And you'll do a deal on the passion of the person as much, more than you will the numbers, because they're all the same. They all work. They all look perfect.
You mentioned best practices sharing as a source of competitive advantage. Do you see others, and do you believe in such a thing as a sustainable competitive advantage?
Yes, Michael Porter would argue, he's the strategy guru, quote. He argues that sharing best practices is not a competitive advantage. I think that's why he's at university. It is without question the most valuable thing you can get your hands on. Think of all that intellect out there. Think of the intellect in this room. Think what you can learn from each other here. You've got a bunch of startups here and entrepreneurs. Think what you can teach others about your failures, stumbles, how tough it was to get IPO money, venture money, all the things you went through, how much you can learn from each other. See, that's what this whole thing's about, I hope, is sharing the practices of starting up new businesses and all the pitfalls that you all face into. And sharing those is an enormous benefit. What you're doing in this outfit you've got here is a terrific service if it works the way the brochure says it does.
This one. And to end the session, management theory and best practices in management are becoming commodities ever more with similar trainings, books, and everything. But people can still provide differentiation and advantage. Going forward, how do you see this evolving? This
is all in. Businesses generally has the same general outline of what it should look like. The question comes down to who's driving the bus and how hard are they driving the bus and how much passion have they got and how excited are they to energize others. One of the biggest mistakes we find with MBAs who graduate, they've been raising their hand to be recognized all through school. Then they show up in a company and they raise their hand and to be recognized, and they get out of the pile. And one day you call them manager. This is where most of them screw up. They still start raising their hands. When they don't realize they now have 10 people working for them, it's not about themselves anymore, it's about them, the 10 people. And they will be good, they'll only be as good as the reflected glory of the 10 people. That transition is huge. And so many people stumble on it because we train them to raise their hand and have the answer and not to build those 10 people into leaders. You've got to get excited about the growth in your people. And to the point, there'll always be the same books. There's Drucker books, there's Welch books, there's Porter books, there's a zillion books. It really comes down to consistent deliverability, driving it all the time, and a complete love of seeing great people grow and get careers that are far beyond the dreams they ever had.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you very much.